So you were doing really well. Maybe you'd been a few weeks, maybe you'd been a few months, a few years even without gambling, and then for whatever reason, whatever triggered you, whatever it was, whatever that flashpoint was, you went and you gambled. And now you feel like you've undone all your hard work. Maybe you've lost all the money you'd saved. Maybe you are really, really at a very low point. So where do we go from here? Where do we go from the place we thought we were at, which was on this path to a gamble-free life, to a better life, to long-term recovery? How do we get back on there? Because at the moment, we might be feeling like we've let ourselves down. All right. Now, this is something I have spoken about before, but it has been triggered by a comment from one of my longest-standing subscribers who I know was doing really, really well with their recovery. And I got a message to say, Phil, I've relapsed. I've lost a load of money. What do I do? Please talk about this. And like I say, whilst I've talked about it before, there's been new subscribers, new followers, and all the rest of it. And it is a very, very important thing to talk about. Firstly, the most important thing to consider is that very, very few long-term recovery stories are without a hitch. My very own, and it's not over yet, is not without lapses and without relapses and bumps in the road. It's just the very nature of quitting from something that is highly addictive, which is going to ultimately lead, in many occasions, to setbacks. All right, but that's not to say we give up. So what do we do? If you're coming to this video off the back of what you perceive to be a relapse, what do you do? Right, I'm going to forego the normal shameless self-promotion, but if you want to support me, you know exactly what to do. The very first point to make is, how do we differ between a lapse and a relapse? Okay, because in principle, it sounds very much like the same thing. You've gone X amount of time without gambling, and now you've gambled. All right, so what is the difference? The difference is incredibly important when it comes to your recovery journey. I'm going to use the example of someone who gambled every day and went a month without gambling. And then for whatever reason, a particularly stressful day at work, an argument with the wife, whatever, maybe finding yourself in a situation where gambling is open and available to you, which maybe you shouldn't have been in, for whatever reason, all right? The willpower has slipped and, you found yourself gambling. That is a lapse. Okay? A relapse occurs when, after that lapse, we then proceed to continue in the way we were before. We fall back into the same habits we were before the recovery even started. If you think about it as an alcoholic, if an alcoholic goes 6 months without drinking, goes to a party, has a drink, gets drunk, wakes up in the morning, all right, regrets what they did, feels terrible, berates themselves for it, okay, that is a lapse. It's something that you've done which you had for a significant period of time not done. Okay, that is a lapse. If that person then thought, well, I've ruined it, I'm going to go down the pub at lunchtime, and they basically not just fall off the wagon, but they nick the wheels off the wagon and torch it. All right, that is then a relapse. Lapses are inevitable in many cases when it comes to recovery. Relapses can be avoided. And so much of that, I believe, is purely psychological. In the example I just gave about, alcoholic having a drink, getting drunk, and then going back to their old ways, a lot of that is because the mindset shifts. Realistically, when you think about it like this, you've been X amount of time without a particular habit, without a particular substance, without a particular activity, in our case, gambling. You can do, so you already know, you've already proven to yourself that you are able to get up day after day after day and go to bed day after day after day, and being able to say to yourself consciously, actively or subconsciously, I didn't gamble today. You know that you can do it. Yes, you slipped. Yes, you've done something that you've told yourself you weren't going to do. Okay, that's a lapse. But you know you can get back on that wagon. You know you're capable of doing this because you've just proven it to yourself. If you use that as an excuse to then just fall back into old habits, then that is a relapse. And relapses can be avoided with the right attitude. And I will always say this because I put this caveat on every video. I am not coming from a place of a high horse. I had lapses, relapses, massive relapses, the whole lot. Okay? But the relapses came when I allowed the lapses to change my mindset. I had, day after day after day, got up, gone, I'm not going to gamble today, gone to bed, having not gambled that day. Right? If I gambled on one occasion, there was nothing to stop me getting up the next day and going, oh, I'm not going to gamble today. You've deviated slightly from the path, but you haven't fallen off it. A relapse is when you fall off that path and you slip back into the path of least resistance. And sad as it is, if you are a gambler, if you are an addict of almost any description, there is always going to be the path of least resistance there, running alongside the path to recovery. Because the path of least resistance is to just fall back into old habits. Gambling is easy. You know, it's easy. It causes trouble. It causes a lot of issues in your life. It's kind of a complex issue, but it's easy. Conversely, recovery is incredibly simple. It reduces a lot of the stress. It removes a lot of the complex issues in your life. All right, but it's not easy. So what you need to do is stay on the simple path, but not the easy one. So that's the difference between a lapse and a relapse. And so how do we deal with it? Well, acceptance is critical, and anyone you speak to about gambling losses or whatever is going to tell you this. Acceptance is absolutely paramount in the early stages. If you've gone and blown a whole load of money gambling, you're going to have to accept, as hard as it is, that money is gone. That's not going to come back. Ultimately, yes, money will come back in time, but the money that you had in hand that was available to you is lost. Any thoughts to the contrary are only going to perpetuate the addiction. Obviously, loss chasing and all the rest of it. Also, if you are able to, then forgive yourself. Much like letting go of the money, letting go of the negative thoughts you've had about yourself, berating yourself, letting go of all that self-hatred is kind of critical if you are then to pull yourself up and get back onto the right path. If you feel negative, if you feel like you've let yourself down, and if ultimately you feel worthless, useless, and all the other things that I constantly felt after a significant loss, whether that be during a period of recovery or not, then that just allows you to sink even lower. I talked in a previous video about a bell curve, how you can either be exceptional in a positive way or exceptional in a negative way. And so many people who are suffering from severe addiction are down here at the bottom of the bell curve. Okay, they climb up, they climb up, they climb up. In recovery, things are getting better, things are getting better, things are getting better. All right, and this is tricky, this is difficult, this is hard, this is a slog, this is day to day. So when they have that lapse, quite often we can use it as an excuse just to slip back down. Just be there. It's more comfortable being there. It's more comfortable being exceptional in a negative way, to embrace almost our addictions and our bad habits and our self-destructive behaviours, than it is to constantly challenge them, to get back on that wagon and to once again challenge the addiction, to try and take that power away from the addiction. So if you have lapsed, my advice is to do everything you can to ensure that lapse doesn't become a relapse. Lapses can often be a point of education for us. If we were able to gamble, if we were able to lapse in the first place, it means that there was something, there was a door ajar that allowed us to go through that door and to gamble. Now, it's not always possible to completely watertight, your recovery. It's not always possible to completely remove the availability of gambling from your life. But if you look at that flashpoint, if you look at that thing that made you lapse, okay, and you go, actually, if I'd done this in advance, that wouldn't have been available to me. I wouldn't have been able to do that. That could be an exclusion, a block. It could be not have taken so much money with you. It could have not have having access to that money in the first place. It could have been declining a certain social event that may have involved an element of gambling. All right, you know what allowed you to get into that position where you are able to act counter to your own original intentions. So it's an education. Make sure that you do something so that the next time something like that arises, you are far more prepared and you're far more able to deal with it in a way that won't lead you to temptation and lead you to acting counter to your best intentions. So basically, don't let a lapse become a relapse. Write off the money. Accept that has gone. Forgive yourself. By all means, berate yourself in the short term. Question yourself, work out what enabled you to do this, and allow yourself to have those feelings, but don't dwell on them, because any extended negative feelings about yourself are only going to drive you back into the arms of the addiction that caused the harm in the first place. okay, and then watertight. Figure out why it was that you were able to gamble. Figure out what you could have done in advance of that lapse and to have prevented it from happening in the first place. And do that now whilst it's on your mind, so the next time the situation arises, you are far better equipped to cope with it. If you think these videos are useful, please do consider signing up to my Patreon. There'll be a link in the description below. Otherwise, if you like, subscribe, comment, do all that great YouTuber stuff, that really helps support me, helps me reach more people, and hopefully helps a few people in the process. Take care, guys. Stay safe, stay sane.